Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. My name is Katie Churchwell. I'm the Education and Volunteer Specialist here at the Wenatchee Valley Museum and Cultural Center. I thank you all for coming here tonight for our webinar and panelist discussion on the documentary Promised Land. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that the Wenatchee Valley Museum and Cultural Center and the Wenatchee River Institute is located on the traditional homelands of the Piscosa or Wenatchee people. We acknowledge the traditional lands and offer respect and gratitude to the Piscosa and to the diverse indigenous peoples that reside in North Central Washington today. I'd like to introduce Rachel Bishop, who is the Community Programs Manager at the Wenatchee River Institute, who will take it away.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Katie. I'm going to start off by just elaborating a little bit more on the land acknowledgement of the Piscosa. The Wenatchee River Institute worked with Piscosa band members to put together a land acknowledgement, and I will read that now for you all. The land Wenatchee River Institute and Wenatchee Valley Museum and Cultural Center sits on is the ancestral homelands of the Shimpishquashu, Piscosa, or Wenatchee people. The Shimpishquashu, meaning people in between, had villages positioned along the Wenatchee River. Their ancestral homeland extends from the Cascade Ridge throughout what is now known as the Wenatchee and Okanagan Valleys. The culture and economy of the Piscosa people centered on fishing. They also gathered roots and berries, basket-making materials, and medicines. They also hunted game. The Piscosa are named within the Yakima Treaty of 1855. Language to establish the Wenatchee Reservation was never followed through, even with the needed surveying completed. Many Piscosa now live on the Colville Reservation, 150 miles northeast of Leavenworth. The Piscosa people are still alive today. They continue to practice their culture within their homelands and are working to get land back within the homelands. The Piscosa people are the original stewards of this land. And I would like to thank all of the panelists who are here tonight, all of whom are members of the Piscosa band. And I feel honored to be here with you all and to learn and listen to what you all have to say. And I hope that everyone in the audience was able to watch the film Promised Land. And if you weren't able to, the link actually is still live through tomorrow. So if after this event you are intrigued to watch, we do recommend that. And just as a quick summary, Promised Land follows two tribes in Western Washington, the Duwamish and Chinook Nation. It examines the larger problems of federal recognition, tribal sovereignty, and how society views Indigenous peoples. I personally was struck by the similarities of struggles and uphill battles of the Duwamish and Chinook to those of the Piscosa. I am, as I said earlier, honored to be amongst our panelists tonight. They will be, and we all will be, examining the issues brought up in the film and how the Piscosa are going about overcoming them. We invite the audience to use the question Q&A function in the Zoom webinar to ask questions, and we will make sure those get asked to our panelists. And I would like to start with our panelists each taking some time to introduce themselves so that our audience can get to know you. And I would like to start with Darnell Sam.
Am I unmuted?
You are.
Okay. Istikanchut Sawakin. My name is Darnell Sam. I currently reside in Nispelum. I'm actually a direct descendant of Chief John Harmel. He was my great grandfather. So that's 3 times. We are, taught to know who we are and where we come from. And, very close, strong ties to the Aboriginal territory of our people, of the Sinsquequos, or Wenatchee people. I'm honored to be here. I watched the video, very moved. I support the 2 tribes in their efforts. Thank you. Limlin.
Thanks, Darnell. Let's go with Wendell.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm Wendell George, former councilman. A number of years ago, I was on the council. My dad was on the first council, 1938. And so it was just sort of natural that I also joined the council. But I lived in Seattle for a while, and I became acquainted with some of the Duwamish people and some of the Chinook people. This was back before they even tried to get the reservation. They were kind of running places to have meetings and that sort of thing. But they were still very active, at least the ones I knew. And we had an Indian center there that collectively brought all of us together in the Seattle area. So I'm familiar with quite a few of the tribes in the state because of that. But my grandfather was home. He was from the Inuit tribe. His father was the last chief, Chilko Sask of the Inuit tribe. But Lahompa, when he was an early teenager, was one of the signers of the Treaty of 1855. He went there because his dad was too old to travel. It took several days to get down to Walla Walla by horseback, and you had to cross Columbia River and swim with your horses. So it was kind of a rough trip. So my great grandfather didn't want to take it, so he sent his oldest son home, or later on he was called Coxet George. So that is basically my introduction. I'll talk later on about the subject. Limlin.
Thanks, Wendell. And I'll pass it on to John.
My name is John Cyrus. I'm also from the Sinsquequos tribe. I'm a citizen of the Caldwell Confederate Tribes. I live in Omak, Washington. I'm currently the chair of the Wenatchee Advisory Group that advises the council. I've also served on the tribal council as well. So has Darnell. So been involved with these issues for quite some time. Before serving on council, during on council, I'm still working on those issues, and I totally understand the plight that Duwamish is going through and the Chinook, and it's a real challenge. So I look forward and thank you for the opportunity to share some more today, and looking forward to hearing from all the panelists.
Thank you. And lastly, William.
Hello, I'm William Dick. I live in the Salem. My great-great-grandpa was John Harmel. My dad, William Dick Sr., and Matthew Dick Jr. was two of our speakers for the tribe when we were trying to get our fishing and hunting rights and everything. I used to travel with them, take them to the meetings and stuff down there in Leavenworth and Cashmere, all over places. And after I lost my dad and my uncle and them, I just kind of quit following. And, I'm glad John and Darnell and Window, Colleen, they all kept up with everything going on. I'm just glad to be here and wanted to see what was going on down there and make sure everything's still being followed through. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thanks, William. Well, I think that this event will be most powerful if it's, a more natural conversation between our panelists and sharing what it is they want to share and thoughts based on the film, and sharing, the most valuable information for the greater community to understand. And so I just have a question that I'm just going to read off just to kind of get the conversation started. And so in the film, both the Duwamish and Chinook shared their stories of why their chiefs decided not to re-sign the treaties after many changes were made, and there was a push to move them off of their ancestral homelands. And I personally know that there's a similar story within the Piscosa and Chief Harmelt. So I thought it would be a good starting point to help connect folks with the story of why Chief Harmelt also decided not to sign the treaty. And so whoever would like to start with sharing that story, I welcome you to.
Rachel, I'll start, and then we'll bring folks in. But I think just to back up just a little bit about why Chief Harmelt, who's an ancestor of mine as well, why they didn't move, and they just it goes back to really the name in Pascualsa talks about the people that live in the middle, and for our people, we were fortunate to have a really good fishery there that we preserved in Article 10 of the Treaty of 1855. We had really good root grounds. We in our languages, we talk about that as being rich, being very rich in all things, both in family, resources, and with those resources, we have responsibilities to take care of it. And our people were raised and since time immemorial on these lands, and are just tied to that land. Our people are buried there. We still take care of those cemeteries, and it's really important to understand how once you're growing up into that way, it becomes a part of you, right? And I totally understand. My grandmother was born, Margaret Dickondon. She was born at a fish camp outside of Monitor, and she'd always take us back there to go get cedar roots. She was a basket maker, so she used those cedar roots out of the icicle up in that area. And once those, it's a part of you, and you can't leave it, and you have to go back and whenever I have problems or I feel down, I make that trip down to the icicle and just sit by it, and it grounds me, just being in those homelands. You're connected to the world again. So and that's very large, look at it, but I want to pass it on to other folks to talk about some of those things too. Who wants to go next, Darnell or William? Wendell?
I defer to my elder Window.
Uh-huh.
I'll give it a shot here. I was sharing an email with Rachel. You know, there's so many parallels in struggles, and it's not just, you know, our tribe or the Chinook tribe or the Duwamish tribe. You know, regardless of, you know, you know, where we are and whatever struggle it is, like even today. I mean, right now it's easy for us to find a purpose, you know, what we fight for, our rights, our Aboriginal rights. Like right now we're in discussions with the state on hunting, and you know, we had to reaffirm our fishing rights, and you know, it was a we spent millions and millions of dollars in this court case on attorneys, and you know, they created the video False Promises. We have our own video, which, you know, I wanted to put a little shout out there for people to, you know, look up that video, you know, and if you watch that video and you watch the Promised Land, and I just find it very coincidence when we talk about false promises and promised land, you know, the word promise, you know, are kind of, you know, has its own meaning and it takes on its own shape and form. You know, but as John was stating, we, you know, and I said earlier, you know, just understanding who we are, where we come from, and that connection, the connection to, you know, what our elders had taught us, and our ancestors taught them. You know, there is a very strong, you know, a lot of teachings and everything that we do, whether it be gathering roots, cleaning graves, fishing, having memorials, root feasts. I mean, there's so many things that, you know, even though, you know, the Duwamish and the Chinook are looking for recognition, you know, just the same, you know, we do the same things. Like, we don't need the federal government to tell us who we are. We still conduct our ceremonies. We still, you know, function as a tribe, regardless of where we reside today. You know, we know where our elders went, we know where our ancestors went. And that same medicine and that same sense of being is still there when we go back to our homelands and when we fish. You know, it's like, you know, I've been just this year recently, a few months ago, was bestowed the honor of being, you know, appointed the new salmon chief. And to me, that was a great honor, an honor that essentially isn't about me as a person, but it's more or less about, you know, the responsibility to recognize the spirit of that food, that salmon, that salmon spirit. You know, it comes back every year to feed our people. It nourishes our spirit, our hearts, our minds, our bodies. And, you know, to understand that, you know, that connection and those teachings are run from where we come from and from our elders and our ancestors. So the same thing that we hear, that compassion, we hear the fight in the voice of the Duwamish and the Chinook. You know, you can sense the tone, you can sense the urgency when you watch their video and watch our video. And I was sharing, you know, with Rachel too. It's hard to watch that video because a lot of those elders are gone today, and you know, they fought the fight, you know, and I was, you know, there to fight, and it was kind of ironic. One of my uncles is no longer with us. When I was appointed to the advisory board by resolution back in 1999, his words were, it says, we ain't gonna be here forever, and we need somebody to be the next step. Well, by putting me on the board back in 99, I didn't know that I was going to be the next step. And then here we are today. We're still keeping up the work that they started way back then. And I mean, I'll kind of stop here and let somebody else talk, because I could go on and on, because I am very compassionate about you know, our cause, and just as much as the Duwamish and the Chinook are. Thank you. I'll hand it off to Wendell.
Okay, yeah, I raised my hand. Yeah, both previous were good points. I wanted to maybe expand on the fact that we always want to go back to what we thought our home was. Because I was born on the reservation, Colville Reservation up by Ojai Lake. And I spent my first school years up to the 7th grade in the Spilo. And then it was during World War II. My dad went into the Navy and was gone for a while, and I had to stay with my grandfolks. But after the war, he got a job in Wenatchee, and the reason, well, the job was one that he wanted, but the real reason he wanted to go there is because that's our area, that's where we came from. So he picked a spot on East Wenatchee that he said, from what I know, his folks told him that the tribes, there were 4 tribes together at that time. It was the Wenatchee, Chelan, and Inuit, and Moses Columbia tribes would have meetings there, which today we call powwows, but they would get together for several days. And it was right in the area that my dad picked, which was at that point an orchard, a paraquat orchard, about 100 acres. So he was able to get 5 acres on the end of that cod orchard. And that's where I lived until I graduated from high school. And then just a few years ago, I think it was 1990, they discovered the Clovis, the spear. It was just about a mile up from where we were living. And of course, we didn't know anything about that. That was, but it was living proof of what my dad had heard on all these stories, that that's where our people always gathered. And so we went down, there was a lot of us, about 100, I think, of us went down there to protest the fact that they were digging up what we thought might have been a graveyard. And we weren't sure, but they found a lot of things that were actually with people when they were living. So, but we were able, after a long negotiation, we were able to stop the digging. But we never did find out whether it was a graveyard. But we do know that that was a camping site of some kind. And that's exactly what my dad wanted to get back to. So he had research. Back in those days, we didn't have internet, so it was really hard to do any research. You had to go to the library, and they didn't have much in the library, especially about Indians, because nobody wrote anything about Indians. And but he would talk to other people that he knew and compare notes. And so there's a number of stories that I don't want to get into all of them, but he published some of those in the Wenatchee World. They would ask him, about this or that, and he would give a dissertation on it. So all this was from the fact that we wanted to be in our homelands. And even though it didn't look anything like our ancestors when they were there, it was still home to us. And so that's exactly, I think, what Darnell was talking about. And that's what we're trying to carry on. All of us, we each have stories that can be told. And the whole idea is that once we get an agreement to go ahead and get this reservation. See, we have a different situation than Duwamish and the Chinook. We have actually, the president and the Senate have approved that we should have a reservation. So that's not a problem. The problem is they tried to give us a reservation way up in the hills where it was not livable at the time. There was no transportation and no way to get there, and it was just a horrible location. So when our people in those days never accepted that, and that resulted in the fact that we didn't have a reservation. But now the place is completely populated with people. We're looking for a 6 mile by 6 mile reservation, and there's no spots that's livable in that whole valley that's that big. So we're going to have to do a piecemeal, find some livable spots that we can call home, and then maybe find some other spots that we can develop. But that wouldn't be any different than our Colville reservation. You know, we were given that whole reservation of Colville, a lot of area, but then they opened it up to settlement. And so all the good land along the rivers were taken up. And if you wanted to farm, you had to farm up in the hills. And so that was, luckily, my grandfather, home, or Proxet George, moved into Carter Valley, which nobody knew about that. That's why he was able to get in there, because that was a hidden valley. It's 20 miles out of Omak, and it was really hard to get in there in those days. There were no roads, no good roads anywhere. So, but he was lucky that way. But most of the good farming land along the river was taken by other people other than the tribal people. And so Colville Reservation is faced with it. We're buying back. The tribe is buying back land when it comes available. They have a criteria of land that's near the water, or something that makes them a priority. And so over the years, we've been able to get some of that good land back. Let's say we're starting in Wenatchee area, same situation. All the good land has been taken. So if we can negotiate with maybe the federal government for some pieces of land that they have, or if somebody wants to sell some land that's acceptable to us, that's the kind of land we're going to be looking for. But it's going to be piecemeal, just like the Colville Reservation. It'll be dotted property all over the Wenatchee Valley. But we'll have you might call it a virtual reservation, because it's not contiguous, but we can make it work, just like the Colville Reservation has made it work. And that's eventually what we like to do. Our problem is we haven't found the land that's acceptable yet. We're still looking, but I think eventually it's going to come about. Limlin.
Thanks everybody for sharing. I think that some folks might not know. I know, John, you mentioned you're the chair of the Wenatchee Advisory Group, and I think that it might help folks to understand, you know, sort of what the Wenatchee Advisory Group is and what they do. And, you know, because I think after watching the film, we're thinking about all these rights that Indigenous peoples are fighting to get back that were promised to them. And so, yeah, just talk a little bit about what the advisory group is and how that all fits in with the Colville Confederated Tribes.
Okay, I'll do my best. Thank you, Rachel. And you know, in talking about the Wenatchee Advisory Group, Darnell alluded to a little bit of it, and William talked a little bit about how that came about. His dad and his uncle really initiated this effort, this Wenatchee Advisory Group, to advise the Colville Business Council, the official government of the Colville Confederated Tribes. The Wenatchee and the Piscataqua are one of those confederated tribes. And there were a lot of issues that have been passed down to William and Matthew that, you know, had to be addressed. And they utilized this structure of the Wenatchee Advisory Group, the people of the Wenatchee, to consider all the issues that are impacting our homelands, our rights and responsibilities, and advise the council on official action. So when you look at some of the trust land that the Wenatchee still have in that area, it is it's kind of a long history, but as the federal responsibility played out, the U.S. federal government and how they react to tribes, there were a number of court cases that determined, yes, the Wenatchee leadership and the Wenatchee population moved to the Clovis Confederate tribes. There are some Wenatchee people that moved and went to the Yakima Nation, but the leadership and the recognized entity moved to the Clovis Confederate tribes. So as we, and then Wendell talked a little bit about the Clovis Point, and when that was discovered, all agencies, state, county, federal, if they have a project that disturbs the ground or they're doing a lot of digging, they have to watch out for cultural resources. And in that area, it's just littered with, all those areas of our people's homelands and, old campsites and different things. So when they undertake those things, they have to notify the Cobble tribes, hey, we're going to be digging in, East Wenatchee or Leavenworth. And they have to notify us because we're the tribe that oversees that still. And we have interest in that area. So, at the very beginning, and maybe William can talk a little bit more about, some of those beginning roots of how that Wenatchee Advisory Board started. And Darnell mentioned it too. I was put on the Wenatchee Advisory Board at the same time Darnell was, to really bring about the next generation of leaders that are going to take on these tasks to maintain the responsibilities that we have on that land. I would like to ask William if he could, if he had the opportunity to give us a little history on what his uncle and his dad passed down about how that was formed.
Well, this is William Dick. From what I know, was a lot of stories handed down from our grandma, Celia and Dick. She talked about her grandparents, John Harmel, and then she lived with them. She grew up with them. That was her grandparents. Talked about the homeland all the time. Every time we had our winter dance or we'd have a big family meetings or anything, grandma always told stories.
Sit on that side.
She kind of like educated the whole family. Darnell and all of us. We'd sit and listen to her. And she always talked about wanting to move back home. And kind of where my dad and uncle and them kind of jumped in and try to get the land back, get our hunting and fishing rights back. That's kind of where it all started from grandma. Told stories. She always remembered all the places down there. She would take her kids, my dad and uncle and nephews. They used to travel down there to go berry picking or root digging. She'd show them the old home site, stuff like that. That's pretty much what got everything started with our grandmother. Pretty much all I got to say. Darnell knows more to the story.
My Uncle Matthew Dick Jr., he was on council in the 80s. And as William was mentioning, my great grandmother was raised by John Harmel. that was her grandfather. And, you know, she, he was always, he stayed in he had a homestead and allotment on up Nahaham Canyon, just out of Kashmir. And, there's a story behind even the mystery of, he died in a house fire in July. That we suspect that somebody actually, burned his house up, because he was slated to go to DC because he was still fighting for that reservation. And as much as he instilled, that fight into his granddaughter and his only granddaughter, you know, and when Matthew started on council in the 80s, that was the fight, that we still wanted our reservation, and that's essentially how it goes. I did see in the Q&A what's the status of the Wenatchee Advisory Group effort to get the U.S. government to award land back to. So essentially, just like the Chinook and the Duwamish, they tried to get federal recognition, and a Quinault tribe opposed it. Well, when we're a signatory to the Treaty of 1855, which is the Yakima Treaty, but we're in the middle, and we're no different than any other tribe. Is even though that we're all fighting, we understand our same struggles. We don't get along with the Yakimas. Even with some of our own constituent tribes from the Colville tribe, there's 12 bands here. We, if you read the history, it's like, I'd say the Wenatchee, the Inuit, the Cheman, and the Methow, those tribes are really closely related. But if you knew the history, that Moses Columbia, Chief Moses went down, and Chief Moses wanted to be the chief of chiefs. And when they had this, this treaty, he went down and tried to speak on behalf of the Wenatchees. And the Wenatchees that resided on the Yakima sold their rights. If you read the history, they sold their rights for $9.30 so they could get their irrigation on the Yakima reservation. But we never sold our rights. And that's why John Hummelt stated, because we was promised that reservation. Well, essentially, that was the same story that was given to, my Uncle Matthew when he was on council. And that's when they started this efforts to get a reservation, which started into this fishing rights case between the Yakimas and the Colville Wenatchees. And, we went to the 9th District Court. We won our fishing rights in 2008. They appealed. It was reaffirmed in 2010. And the Yakimas have ceded rights to everything, and we have treaty rights just like they do, because we're a signatory to the Treaty 1855 as well. But as you stated in Article 10, it's like we were promised that reservation. And essentially, after we won our fishing rights case, we was trying to solicit some of the legislators to honor that, because as Wendell stated, we have, the president signed off. We have it was ratified by Congress that they were supposed to give us a reservation. They surveyed it in the wrong area. It's all in the video. We know these things, so there's a lot of history, even between, the Yakimas and the Colvilles, Wenatchees, and then even between Moses Columbia and Wenatchees, it's like, we really, that's why we were taught to know who we are and where we come from, and to understand that history and know that, where lines were crossed. And, so I, like I said, I could go on and on, but, we're still in that process of trying to get the government to do that. But as Wendell was saying, we're looking, we're also trying to be proactive and look at other ways of doing it without having to go through legal battle. We want to, just like we go to the Forest Service, BLM, to have them, just, have some of these lands that we're interested in to be signed over to us, because, the government, federal government You know, it's like we will accept land long as it meets our needs. You know, so we're still working on it. We're, you know, but we don't, you know, like you said, we spent millions of dollars to reaffirm our fishing rights, and we don't, you know, we learned quite well that we don't want to go down that path on a legal realm of spending all that money to, you know, for a case. And you know, it's the same thing with the state. You know, they don't recognize that we have hunting rights. Well, show me in black and white where it says that we gave up any rights anywhere. When we, you know, our elders have lived there and they gather, they hunt, they fish. They didn't need to verify to anybody, and we don't think that we're any different today. So I hope that answers, you know, that question. And you know, like I said, I really appreciate the opportunity to do this because, you know, as William was stating, you know, back in the initial stages, it was just Matthew and William Senior and Wendell, and there was a whole slew of people that went to the video showings. They spoke at, you know, various gatherings, various functions, just to advocate for the purpose of our Sims Pasquasa people.
You know, if I can just add a little bit onto what Darnell was talking about, I mean, he covered it really well. Some of the challenges that you know are not unique to our situation. When you look at that treaty making period in the 1800s, when you look at even how it plays out today, federal agencies or the federal government really just can't get away from trying to divide and conquer Native people, indigenous people. So they frequently try to pit one another against each other. And once they do that, then they don't have to really address some of those rights and responsibilities. So it's very challenging. And I think Darnell was alluding to, we're going to find more creative ways of answering how we establish those homelands, and not playing to that game. I mean, it's really hard, and sometimes you have to go to court, but yeah, it's tough. It is a very tough situation.
Can you all see the Q&A feature?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yes, I saw it. And
Okay.
There's one more question there, right, Rachel?
Yes. Yeah, so there's I guess maybe one question before the last one that just came in. There was just one sort of addition on about the Wenatchee Advisory Board. Do all the tribes within the Colville Confederated Tribes have advisory boards, or is it just some, not all? And then we'll go to the next question.
You know, I believe the Wenatchees are the only ones that have Wenatchee Advisory Board. We've kept real strong records of who is a descendant of the Wenatchees. The Sinaiks, the Lakes people, have a coordinator, and I believe the Chief Joseph Nez Perce has a position to help with some of their unique issues as well. But I think we may be the only one that has a board. Am I right in that?
For the most part, there is the Sinaiks Confederacy they just developed, which essentially is still council, but they speak specifically to just Sinaik issues. And if I had to say the Nez Perce, the closest thing they come is that they have their longhouse group that comes together, you know, and speaks. They just go on subcommittees within council. Essentially, I want to answer the question for the reasoning why it was. So we was in that fishing rights case back in the late 90s, and when we was going forth, they would have meetings to advise the tribal attorneys and tribal council about what perspectives and efforts we wanted to go forward during that case. And that was the creation of the advisory board then. And essentially, as we go forward from there, we just retained the board because we're still advocating and still fighting for, you know, that reservation and anything to do with Wenatchee. Even, I mean, we had a cultural we had a cultural site within the landfill down there in Douglas County landfill, and we was notified by the landfill. They have a federal process that they had to confer with the constituent tribe, which being Wenatchee, we went down to look at, and so it was an advisory board that went down with council. I was on council at the time when we met, and there was two other advisory board members that went down, and our attorney when we were looking at that, because it's essentially a cultural site within the landfill that's going to get inundated by the landfill. But there were some mitigation measures that were proposed, but hasn't been settled upon yet. So I hope that kind of explains some of the reasoning of how it was devised. Go ahead, Wendell.
Hey, Joe. Yeah, they don't have the Lakes tribe they just won a big decision up in Canada. They now are existing as a as a Indian people. They didn't have a board like we have, but they had the backing of the council. They spent a lot of money for legal work up in British Columbia, and that was a number of years that they had to fight that. But now they're recognized as existing, which we had the same problem as Wenatchee when we first got filed for the fish back. Oh, I think it was probably early 2000. The judge first said that, well, you don't exist because you don't have a tribal meetings or activities or any of that sort of stuff. And that was the reason why we, in 1999, we created the committee that we have, because the judge says we didn't exist because we weren't active. But we know that there's probably close to or more than 3,000 members of all the 10,000 that's on our tribe that have some Wenatchee in their background, Wenatchee, Indian, or the tribes that we're talking about. So there's a large group of us. It's just that it's really difficult on a reservation to separate everybody out into one tribe. There's 12 tribes. We're all mixed up, but we do exist. And now the lakes have a situation where they exist, and they'll probably be going after some land up in Canada. That'd be the next step. Now they won the case where they can hunt up there, because that was the issue, and that had to say that they did exist, because British Columbia said they didn't exist way back when, and now they do exist, and so things will go on from there. We don't have to make that fight anymore because the judge has said, agreed with us that we are operating as a tribe, and we continue to do that. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's the kind of thing that's happening with the 12 tribes.
Yeah, thank you. So there was a question that came in, and I'm going to read it out, and whoever feels comfortable answering. So can you talk about the Wenatchee Land Back fundraiser that is going on in Wenatchee, and is that related to the advisory board's efforts?
The short answer is yes.
The short answer is yes, and it's no too. It's complicated, I guess, is a better way. It's not officially yet linked to the Wenatchee people. I think when the Wenatchee Advisory Group found out about it, it piqued our interest. So yeah, we've got a lot of work to do on it. It's hard to answer it in a concise way because it's complicated.
So I'm going to take a shot at answering that. So The person that's actually spearheading it right now is a descendant of the Wenatchee. She actually approached the advisory board some time ago and requested to form some form of nonprofit so that those funds could go towards that. Since then, it was also discussed that, within the tribe, the formalities of getting things done doesn't happen very fast. It takes various committees to go through to get that process initiated. They essentially sign an attorney to do it, and then it validates the process, and then it puts it in motion. We had, there were some other, parallel issues that go along with it that still yet to be resolved that we're still looking at. But essentially, I would hope the fact that, this land buyback, which, I support, and it sounds like a really good idea. If you're going to say you're going to buy, raise money back for Wenatchee land buyback, I would hope that it would benefit exactly what it was said that it was raised for, Wenatchee. With that being said, that's where it gets complicated, because we still have to follow our processes. We're still tied to the tribe and how it goes about to do that. I mean, essentially, we Wendell knows, John knows, I know, as being former tribal leaders, that, essentially we're not allowed to speak, for the tribe in any manner when you're a tribal leader. But when you're a descendant and you're an at-large, you can participate on panels like this. But if you're on council and you are, want to advocate for something like this, you really have to get, clarification and approval for that to be done through the committee to even do that. So within those confines of everything within the process, there's a lot of protocols and a lot of process that need to be followed. And essentially we're trying to shore those things up, going forward. So I think that's kind of where we stand today.
Thanks, Darnell, for tackling that question. So I think, kind of off of that question, are there ways for the general public to help with this process of getting bits and pieces of land, or maybe even finding an actual 6 mile by 6 mile piece? I imagine if folks knew a way to help that was the proper way to help, that people would. And if there is, can you share with us?
I can speak to a couple of things that my time on council and before, we had several meetings with the governor, as well as our senators Murray and Cantwell, and express support if we won our fishing rights case, that they would help support us finding a land base to support that. So we haven't re-engaged those senators yet, but I think it really starts, as you're talking about. It starts at the grassroots level, and gaining an understanding and talking about how the Wenatchee people, the Pasquosa people, still need their reservation. They still need their land, and working together and educating people about what that means, and getting that idea out there, I think is really important. And talking about how the Wenatchee people are still tied to the land. They still go back every season, whether it's digging roots, fishing, taking care of the cemetery, our powwows that we have down there, our gatherings. So, building that bridge, not just on this issue, but other things. Try to, include people and learn. I think that's going to be a really big foundation that we can build off of. So when those representatives go back to their community meetings and say, what do you guys think about, this Wenatchee land buyback thing? And they're like, oh yeah, I've heard about it. I think you should support it. And when you have letter writing to those senators, they'll take that in, but they need to know and understand that this is important to their constituents. So that's where that education starts, I think.
I'd like to expand on what John just talked about. Uh, Actually, William and John and Darnell have all referred to Matthew and William, and I was with them in the 80s when they started this, and we went to a whole bunch of meetings down in Wenatchee. The various clubs down there invited us, like the Rotary Club, and we gave speeches and talked to individuals. And one of those meetings that I remember we had at the college, Wenatchee Valley College, and what they actually, we had a room full of people there. And the question that came up was, are you going to start a casino? Because we had just started one up here in Chelan. And of course, we said, well, that wasn't in our mind. We're not looking for a casino. Of course, if the people in Wenatchee wanted one, we could work with them, but we weren't going to go down there and rabble rouse them with a casino right off the bat. That was in the 80s, and things were, the people in Wenatchee didn't know much about us at all. Today, now, our tribe is working with Pasco, and the whole idea, Pasco has agreed to it. The whole idea is to put a casino down there. So it's a whole different environment that's been working with the Pasco people. I don't know if that would be the case with Wenatchee, but we're not looking at a casino. We're looking at a way to have a community meeting with all the people, a way to do things together. Right now, we don't have that. And it's like the Duwamish has had to do before they got started. They rented places, and I actually went to some meetings that they had down First Avenue in Seattle. That's probably what we're going to have to do if we really get organized. But we do have, and nobody's mentioned that. I'm surprised they haven't. We have a graveyard site there just out of Kashmir. And we go down there. A couple of years ago, we had an anniversary. What was it? 150-year anniversary of the graveyard site. And so Apple Annie's is right beside that. So they have a big room, and we went in there and had a big dinner and a lot of discussion among our people, and had a giveaway. We had all the things that we normally do at things like that. So that Apple Valley was a good place to have that. They really invited us to do that sort of thing and helped us. And so I put together a proposal to buy that because they had it up for sale. It was expensive because this is a tremendous building, a very good building, and they got a good business. But that's things kind of were falling apart within our committee, our Wenatchee committee. So we didn't have many people participating in that, even though I got an appraisal of that area. When I come back to the committee and presented it, we only had about less than 10 people that voted on it, and they voted it down. I think they were afraid of, this is my guess, because they didn't really tell me why they voted it down, but it was a big business, and they were afraid of that. They're afraid we couldn't handle it. But my proposal was we weren't going to, this is an antique shop, and the antique shop was operating. And my idea was to have it continue to operate as an antique shop, and we would have this meeting room, and there was office space too that would be available. They could continue that business, and we would if our operation would be that they would take that as part of the negotiation and continue operating that until we got our feet on the ground and was able to take over more. It was kind of a phase-in type thing, and that's the only way you're going to be able to do things, because the tribe at that time, and they probably still don't have, it was a $4 million process, and you don't walk into that, with the cash. You have to work out a negotiation. But that's the kind of thing that we're looking for. Is a place where we can have community meetings. Like right now, we have longhouses on the reservation. We had community centers before with a gym and everything for the young people, but the longhouse is where we have our funerals and meetings of various kinds, where you had a lot of people was going to attend. In fact, at the longhouse, one of our last big meetings of our committee was at the longhouse, where we had over 100 people, and the longhouse is really an excellent place to have it. It's all log and tribal background. It looks exactly like you would think the tribe would look like in a longhouse, and we enjoy that. That's been really a place to do it here on the reservation. That's the kind of thing we're looking for down there. And if things could develop into some sort of business, that's fine, because in order to keep an operation going, you have to have some income coming in. Otherwise, our Colville tribe will not finance a large operation. It's got to stand on its own to some extent. So I'm just giving you some of the background of problems we have to do in order to do this. But I think over the years now, we've been able to educate a lot of people in the Wenatchee area. And I really give Rachel and Mara credit for things we've been doing lately. In the Leavenworth area, they really helped expose a lot of things, because one of the first questions that came up, I was told, is that people said, does the Wenatchee people still exist? That's because they didn't see us. They didn't know we were there. And so we're trying to put the signs up there in Leavenworth for their walking trail, that right now there are signs, but they talk about history. And then when you read that signs, it looks like maybe the history is all there is, that there's nothing today. And so we're adding stuff that we've done in the last few years, and let people know that we still exist and we're still active. And that's what's needed, more and more of that. And our committee is finally getting active on doing that sort of thing. Before, when I was with Matthew and William, we had that video that we showed it in the theaters, and we went to various places to show it. But it was a one-time deal. The people listen to that and they say, oh, great. Then walk away and then forget about it. Our follow-up wasn't there. We had to continue that in some way. And now that's what we're trying to do. We're having meetings all the time on various things. Myra brought up the situation with the Kashmir school. They were talking about, at first they were talking about the mascot. They want to know if the chieftain name was bad for us. Well, that really wasn't the issue. We started to talk about the Indian culture and that sort of thing. And they're really interested in that. So we're trying to follow up with that and maybe get some classes in that school to tell the people what the Wenatchee tribe is all about. And that's a real good start. And I hope we can continue to that thing. We keep that thing going. And so I just wanted to expand on what John was talking about.
Thanks, Wendell. So there is one last question in the chat, and I know we're a little bit past 8, but since there's just one more, maybe this will be our last question for the night. Are you okay with that, John and Wendell and William? Cool.
Yes.
Okay, and just so the audience knows, we lost Darnell. His phone died, but he says thank you to everybody. So the last question for the group is, were the Piscosa involved in monitoring the digging for the sewer extension in East Wenatchee for the proposed Wenatchee Landing development?
I'll jump in real quick. I am not sure, but I can check on that. I know at the Clovis tribes, like I talked about earlier, the cultural resources that must be monitored with any kind of projects, public work projects like that. It'll go through the history and archaeology program out in Spelem. Guy Mora is the director of history and archaeology. He's the tribal historic preservation officer. And Wendell alluded to it a little bit before, as some of our elders that were holding leadership positions in the Wenatchee Advisory Group, as they passed on, we were kind of in a turmoil for a while. But now that we've reorganized and I've shared a couple emails with Guy, and he definitely will let me know. I can ask him to see if we were involved, if he sent in any comments. Normally what would happen in the past, he'd bring those things to the Wenatchee Advisory Group to say, hey, there's something going on over here, just wanted to let you know, are there things that we need to know? They have a lot of information and cultural resources, traditional knowledge stored at History and Archaeology. So in his official response from the tribe as the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer, he would give them comments on things they need to look at, and any kind of inadvertent discovery or anything has to be turned over to the History and Archaeology Office, and then we'd set up a plan on how to address it. So it's really important that the city, if it is East Wenatchee City, that they work with History and Archaeology.
Great. Well, I wanted to just say thank you to the audience for engaging with questions for our panelists. And I especially want to say thank you to all of our panelists for spending time tonight to, analyze issues brought up in the Promised Land film and share what the Piscosa are working on, and history pieces and pieces that are happening currently. It's great to just have that full picture. And like Wendell, you said, not just the history, things are currently happening as well, and things that we should be celebrating. So yeah, thank you, Wendell, thank you, John, thank you, William, and thank you, Darnell, for your time.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you everybody for joining in. Really appreciate the opportunity.
And just lastly, if you haven't seen False Promises, definitely watch it, because that will help you connect more with the Piscosa and their efforts to get their fishing rights back. And thank you, Wenatchee Valley Museum, for having us. And yeah, lots of praise coming in on the chats, panelists. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So yeah, thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was great having everyone here.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Katie.